everyone. We're ready to go. Good evening and welcome to the October 10th regular meeting of the Garrison Union Free School District Board of Education. As always, our first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Laura advises that she has very brief superintendent remarks, and then Alex has principal's remarks.
Actually, I'm just saying hello to Garrison, and I'm throwing it over to Alex because I'll be talking later during discussion time regarding capital project and the Boy Scout method. So, welcome everybody.
As a world record superintendent.
Well done.
Alex, it's all yours.
Good evening, everyone.
I don't want to disrupt the presentation up there, so I'll just read from a few quick notes. So a few quick updates for us. One was for student government. We actually had our representative elections within the past week. Speeches were made along with our student government executive officers, so congratulations to all who would run. I will be meeting with them. Their first meeting will be tomorrow. I am interested in what they will be advocating for. I do not know what is on the agenda, but it promises to be, I'm sure, full meeting. Thank you to Mr. Evans as well, who's been facilitating that for some time now. Spirit Week is this week, so we also have had a number. Today was Superhero Day. Tomorrow is, and I'm losing track and I can't zoom in. Sports Day. Thank you. You have yours ready. Great. And then on Friday, of course, we have our soccer game coupled with Cougar Pride Day. I received my sweatshirt today. Ready. It might not be the right weather for such, but I'll get there. Again, thank you to Mr. Evans as well for helping with that, and the student government executive officers, as well as Ms. Clark, our 8th grade advisor, who's also been instrumental in hopefully circumventing the weather. If so, we'll go to the next week. We will not be playing in the wet weather, I promise. Finally, drop everything and read. We will be having the week of October 22nd, so we actually have 3 authors who are visiting, and this is courtesy of the work of Ms. Kyoko Gelber, our book fair chair, as well as Ms. Courtney McCarthy, our dear chair, so we thank them very much, along with their work of the PTA. 3 authors we have, Mr. Dan Salmieri, who is known perhaps for Dragons Love Tacos. Please come and enjoy the book as well. That will be this coming Monday. The following week on the 23rd, Stephen Savage, author of Where's Walrus, will be coming, and that will be for K3 and K4 respectively. And then finally we'll have Claire Legrand, Some Kinds of Happiness. She'll be visiting on the 29th, so it actually spans well over a week, which is nice. So that promises to be well, and of course, book fair will be the week of the 22nd. And finally, that looks like the updates for this week.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions for Alex?
Oh.
Very comprehensive report.
Yes, yes. Oh, I had slides ready to go, but other matters.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So we have treasurer's reports for July and August.
Yes. I can review both of them very quickly. If you look at July, we have the investment accounts starting out at 4.6 million. Very little activity goes on in July. So we had very little interest of 1,682, and interfund transfers of 770, ending the month at 3,846,294. Okay, and the multi-fund started out the month at 697, 131, and ended the month at 883, 198, and that's mainly due to the interfund transfers, and there were some payments by check and payroll in July. For August, we started the month at 3,846,294. On the investments, again, we had a slight interest of 1,925, and just an interfund transfer and some checks totaling about 170,000, ending the month at 3,677,816. on the multi-fund for August started out at the 883, 198. We had overall income of 204,000, mainly from the interfund transfer from the investment account and interest, a little bit of state aid. We had some payments of 177,000, so we ended the month at 109,9932. There's not much activity that goes on in July and August on the financials, but I'll just report too, we don't have the September reports here, they'll be probably at the next meeting. We have gotten about 75% of our taxes in as of today. So a lot more activity happens in September and October. You have to, I guess, approve them, or do you want me to go through all the financials first?
Why don't you just approve them? Do we have to approve each separately, Beth, or can we accept both in one resolution? How's it written?
They're separate resolutions.
They're separate. Okay, fine. Sue, did you want to, anything else there before we ask to approve the August?
July and August.
July and
You can do
August.
July and August.
That's what I'm asking. It's in one resolution.
You can do those together.
Okay, that was my question. Any questions for Sue on that? Sue, the M&T, the money market fund, the interest is creeping up ever so slightly along with interest rates.
Yeah.
Does that reprices monthly? Whatever we're getting paid reprices
Yes.
monthly?
Yeah, I do have to start looking into maybe seeing if we can get some better rates with CDs again.
Right.
It's been a few years before we actually got some decent rates. We used to invest a little bit more in CDs and rotate them. So something I've been looking,
It's probably
gotta look into.
even 6-month CDs or short duration CDs have got to be better than whatever the money market's paying.
Yeah. A little bit better.
Other questions for Sue? If not, then resolve the Board of Education, Garrison Union Free School District accept the treasurer's reports for July and August 2018 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments? If not, all those in favor? Aye. No abstentions, no nays. We have to approve the budget transfer of 17,000. Remind us, what's the transfers from where to where, Sue?
This is just an array of different accounts. Every month when I'm doing the reports, I look to see if we've overspent on certain lines. And so these are small amounts relative to the budget, I guess I would say. Sometimes it's just that I'm looking forward and seeing what we're planning on spending. So the textbook line and outside contractors in special ed are the ones that we're really putting some extra money into. The rest are pretty small.
Got it. Okay. If there are no questions on that, the resolution is that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District approves budget transfer number 2 in the amount of $17,000.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Abstentions, no nays. Excellent. We have D through I. How many items is that? Several. For the consent agenda, I will go through them quickly. Resolve the Board of Education of Garrison Union Free School District approves the consent agenda items 5 as B through I. First is accept the minutes of the September 20th and September 26th board meetings. Those are in your package. Item next is to approve the CSE recommendations, also in your package. We're going to appoint a substitute nurse. That's approve the appointment of Jill Moody as a substitute nurse for the 2018-19 school year at the rate of $85 a day. We're also going to approve a position increase and amend the appointment of our English for New Learners teacher, and that is to increase the part-time English as a new language teacher position from a .29 to a .37 full-time equivalent. Approve the amendment of the appointment of Megan O'Brien Police, part-time ENL teacher to .37 FTE, effective October 1, 2018. Next item is approve additional ENL items relatedly. Approve Megan O'Brien Police to develop the district-level ENL program for a maximum of 10 hours at a regular hourly rate of pay, during the 18-19 school year. We're also going to appoint a basketball coach. That's Kevin Keegan as the girls' basketball coach for the winter 2018-19 school season at a stipend to be determined upon completion of contract negotiations. And along with that, we'll approve the boys' basketball coach, and that will be Mr. Van Borliotis as boys' basketball coach for the winter 2018-19 season at a stipend to be determined upon completion of contract negotiations. And item last, appoint a volunteer coach. Approve the appointment of Patrick Beckley as volunteer coach for the 2018-19 school year for soccer, basketball, softball, and lacrosse teams. And that's it. I need a
So moved.
moved.
So moved.
Have a second?
Seconded.
Questions or comments?
Shout out to Mr. Beck.
Good, Mr. Beckley not getting a stipend for that? Okay.
It's backup.
All right. Well, congratulations and thank you, Pat.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? No nays. We have two discussion items. The first is regards the Boy Scout cabin in the school forest. Laura, why don't you lead off that discussion?
Sure, and if you go into the superintendent's remarks piece, there's a picture of the Boy Scout cabin, but Boy Scout cabin, and you'll be able to see what we're looking at.
Okay.
So we have two gentlemen, John and John. We're keeping it simple this evening because we all have long days. That are representing the Boy Scouts and want to propose some work on the Boy Scout cabin, which exists within our forest. It's got good bones, it needs some love and attention, and we invited them here to sort of talk about your ideas and your vision and how you want to share it with the greater community. So if you'd like to come up, introduce
John and John,
yourselves,
by all means.
tell us where you're coming
Is this the
from.
only photo?
That's the only, yeah.
Okay.
it's-
Good evening, John and John. Thank you.
Good evening.
Real simple, the cabin was built in the 70s by Boy Scout Troop 4 for the use of the Boy Scout Troop 4. And Boy Scout Troop 4 dissolved, as well as Boy Scout Troop 137 of Cold Spring. In 1999, I started Troop 437, which is a combination of both communities. Several years later, it came to my attention that there was this cabin that was in the forest that could be used for camping and for our use. So my contact at that time was, I believe, Ann Osborne, and we began to start to do some work on the cabin because it had fallen into disarray. We did the roof on it, we did some other work, we did some structural work, we cleaned the area, we put a culvert in, and for the purpose of not only the scouts using it, but the way it was explained to me is that the scout cabin would be used for the youth of Phillipstown. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whether it's a soccer team or an educational group, the Garrison school itself, whoever needed to use it. So flash forward to today, it's still sitting there. It's got good bones, as was mentioned, and it needs help. It needs needs to be. The initial phase 1 proposal has us replacing both the doors with steel doors. They're currently wood, and both of the windows, front and back, vented windows, with plexiglass. They were currently glass, broken now. So the idea was to just, this is a budget of about $3,600 for material, which we could raise in various forms, and I don't think that's going to be a problem to raise the funds. And then hoping that once it gets started, we clear the area, we make it accessible, that it'll be used by more people than it's currently used for. It's now being used by no one. Anyway, I got together with John, and I'm going to turn it over to him. And basically, it would be a Boy Scout project working under the auspices of the Boy Scouts, but for the community, and not for the Boy Scouts, although, of course, they would use. So.
Exactly. Thanks, John. And I should mention, John is a previous Scoutmaster of Troop 437. I'm the current Scoutmaster of Troop 437, and we recently, 2 weeks ago or so, we were up there on a service project. We cleaned out the cabin. We swept up the floors, picked up a lot of the broken glass. It's really been empty for decades at this point, unfortunately. And it's an underutilized resource. It's right in our backyard, and all the kids in the community could definitely use it with different programs. So Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, any other organizations that might want to have meetings up there would be a great place to get out to the woods, take a hike up to the redoubt like we did. Beautiful spot. The Scouts would be involved in doing some more of the cleanup, and then we would have adult volunteers, primarily former Scoutmasters and leaders of the troop and committee members, who would be stepping up to do a lot of the actual labor costs. We've already gotten the estimates, as John mentioned, $3,800 for the initial materials, and we'd like to get started as soon as possible, as soon as we get board approval to do so. So we can get in there, start doing some cleanup work, and then we could look at doing some fundraising in order to get things moving along.
Laura, well, first, so you're not asking the board to help cover the cost of the...
I
of
think
the-
that's
of the
incidental at this particular point. I don't think it's,
Okay.
we're not asking for money at this
Right.
point. We're just asking for permission to
do
be
it.
able to
Permission to do the work. Maybe we'll reach out to the foundation, or who knows.
So, two things that might come to mind for questions that you might have. One is accessibility, and that's a great question. So we would need to have a gatekeeper, and Laura has said that she would be the gatekeeper, and by that I mean anybody who wanted to use the facility, whether it's the Scouts recently had to go to Laura for permission to use it. There would always be somebody there, and everyone would know if somebody was using the facility. And the other problem is, it's not so much a problem, if nobody uses it now, it will fall completely into disarray. But if we fix it up, there's always the danger of vandalism. That is a situation that we really just have to monitor. We're going to have it, it's going to be it's going to be locked up. But once it's now, quote unquote, a little bit livable, there may be a situation where that might become an issue. We did notice that what's happened between the time that we used it and now is that there's a trail that runs, like when I say right to the cabin, there's a marker right on the cabin. So that might be something we may consider in terms of maybe having that trail go a little bit off. But again, I think that the most important thing is to get it up to where it can be used by the community and used by the youth, and it is a treasure, and it was very, very well built when it was built back then. So.
Yep, that's true. It was built by adults in the community who wanted some safe place for kids to go hang out and have events and do camping. And our thoughts were, as far as Scouts go, maybe be able to have that as an option if we wanted to do winter camping, for example. And the cabin would be a safe place where they could do winter camping as well. But also have other educational programs.
We don't maintain trails in the winter up there.
It's not far off of the parking lot. It's pretty straight.
It's like
Straight
right now,
shoots.
and it's right there.
And Laura, what's the issue with liability?
Well, right now it'll be under the Boy Scouts,
The council
those who are
and
doing the
insurance.
work. But I did reach out to NYSER and council just to see if this is, something that we should support or be concerned about. And it's really a matter of, if this is something that we're interested in pursuing, it would be an agreement that council would write up. You would view it as the board, and then you could start your work.
Or on the accessibility, sounds great by the way, on the accessibility I don't know how the school forest rules work, so like would it be open to anyone in the community who came to you and sort of abiding out the key and you said here, that Saturday night, nobody's booked it kind of thing, or?
Well, that's...
Actually, because I thought there was maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought on the signs of the school forest it said there's no access after dusk.
Right.
So obviously if you're camping,
Yeah.
you're up there after dusk, so I'm just curious, can you
And the Boy Scouts have camped
Right.
in the forest.
But they're
Like,
supposed to
community
go with
parent, like, does that have to be a group? Can community parents apply? Do we, I mean, I'm all for people being able to access it, I'd love to go there with the kids. I'm just curious how it would work.
Yeah, I think under
Is
the
that-
sort of the guidance of council, they can help us sort of craft that, to sort of set some rules or expectations.
Aren't they
Of
usually
who,
in
what,
there
where,
when
when?
it's still light anyway? If they're
Is
staying
there a
over.
fire pit or something like,
There's no
what would
fires
serve
right
cooking?
now as the rules of the forest, which we try to follow when we
Okay.
camp there. There's no fires allowed. I imagine there could be propane stoves if someone's cooking something.
Right.
That's something definitely to consider. Outside of that, I think we saw 2 people the weekend we were there, 2 weekends ago. Very few people are utilizing it, but if there is a place for them to go and to see to use the cabin, I imagine more people would be going up there and walking those trails.
I can't think of any reason not to support this enthusiastically. I mean, thank you guys both very much for bringing this to us.
Great.
Is there anything that you can think of that might minimize the possibility of vandalism?
I think they're taking the steps with the plexiglass, with the quotes we got for the steel doors. It's difficult to get, it's not easy to get to, first of all. I don't think there'll be you know the entrances to get up to the forest. There's no, you'd have to take a hike into the woods to cause the vandalism.
And I'm wondering too if there'll be more of a presence of the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts. We would love to use it as a classroom, an environmental education classroom. So maybe there's a little more presence that we're all sort of minding our cabin.
Well, I was always amazed every time I walked up to it. I could be several feet from it, it would be right in front of me and I couldn't see it. And there's a huge advantage to that. It does camouflage itself well, and I don't know why that is or how that is. So there's two ways that you can come in. You can come in off the one road and drive right in, kind of, sort of, like it's a little steep in one area. You'd have to have a pretty good vehicle. And then there's another way where you can hike directly in, and I did take your advice and hike that. So it was a quick shot from the parking area going into the school forest.
So do we need permission from us tonight?
No, I think what we need to do is, if we agree, instruct Laura to ask Chris at council to draw up the agreement between us and the local Boy Scout Council. Get it done as quickly as possible, so hopefully we can approve it at our next meeting. And then maybe you can get started on some work before the weather turns this season. Is that what you're thinking about, or are you thinking more like next spring?
No, we're thinking about getting started with
So
the work
then
as soon as, so it's really, it's going to be weekends when we can get the adult volunteers in there to supervise.
Let's work towards that goal then.
So I guess there's no opposition from any of the board.
Not here.
Sounds good. Call me when you're fundraising. Happy to support.
Well done, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
That's
Thank
a
you all.
great effort.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so
Laura, when we last met, we talked at some length about the PISA project, and we left a number of substantial questions on the table. I think Laura and Garrett, Mike, Sue have invested a significant amount of time in the intervening 2 weeks to begin to answer the questions that we left them with at our last meeting. So Laura, why don't you lead that discussion off at the appropriate point, transition to Garrett, and then back to you, however you want to do it, but let's proceed with answering the board's questions.
okay, great. So yes, you tasked us to answer a few questions, and just when we left, we felt like there were 4 main questions that were left on the table for us to answer or help answer for you. And the 4 are geothermal and Putnam Valley. Another question was about the additional economic analysis. Another question was cooling all the classrooms. And the last was size and financial impact on the project. So we thought we'd go through each one of them because, like Ray said, we have the experts in the room. We have our engineer and architect from Tetra Tech. We have our business administrator, Sue Hutter, and we have our director of facilities, Michael Torrey, as well as you, because I know that all of you have been researching and exploring these hot topics as well. So just with the geothermal experience at Putnam Valley, we learned that they're happy with their geothermal installations. We also learned that our defining difference is on the financial level, that Putnam Valley's building aid is 59%. We receive 10% in Garrison for our building aid, so that's a significant difference.
Before you go any further, for the purposes of the board and anybody who's listening, define building aid.
Sue, do you want to define building aid?
Or just tell us what it is.
It's just what the state would reimburse you on a capital project, so we get 10% aid, they get 59%, that's almost 60%, 50% more than us. So any capital project, is going to be a little more enticing to do at Putt Valley than it would be here at
And why is
Garrison.
that?
Well, it has to do really with the wealth ratio in the district.
And they're not?
Right.
Yeah, and please ask these clarifying questions, because we're all learning, and it's all new language, and I think it's important, because we have everybody in the room, that we can sort of define. They also took advantage of an energy performance contract, and Garrison, because of its size, is not a good contact for an EPC, an energy performance contract.
And we know that why?
Because we've had Con Edison Solutions come here and have a conversation with us, and they spoke about the package that they had for Putnam Valley and the package that we would have to develop that would actually cost us more money in the end for us to be even eligible for their support. So it would include something like geothermal LED lighting, the maintenance system, and Michael, what am I missing?
Well, the thing that you can't overstate is like the LED lighting. It wouldn't really help us here because we already have half our building with LED lighting. So the savings from this side of the building is minimal, so it wouldn't help an EPC at all.
So we just said the EPC is like their, just what's the simple version of it? It's the utility is saying we'll support you if you invest a bunch of money and get into a lower energy cost because that's good for them. And
Right, and maybe you can speak to it more, Sue and Garrett, about the time limits of this.
So the energy performance contracts are performed by private companies, okay? And they do work on a building, and the way the work is paid for is out of energy savings. So the work has to reduce energy use, and that reduction in your use translates into financial savings, and that pays for the project. It has to work so that the payback period is less than 18 years. That's how it goes.
Okay, so you want, I'm sorry, let's finish up on
And that
Putnam
one-
Valley, right?
Yep, and then we also learned that Haldane receives 34% in building aid. And they determined 10 years ago, when they were exploring heating and cooling options, that the geothermal was not an economical choice for them. So that was 10 years ago, that was there. So that was sort of question number one, about geothermal and Putnam Valley, and are there any
Okay, are there any, that's very helpful. Are there any questions from us about the Putnam Valley experience and the degree to which it relates to our situation at all? And do we understand the differences?
I mean, I think the fact that they got 60% reimbursement from the state is an important fact.
I think it's positive.
And they've, remind me, but I think they've had almost no track records. There's no savings. There's no record of savings, like they just put it in, right?
No, I'm sorry, they
Yeah.
put in their first geothermal unit in 1997.
And then they just started I think the new hybrid one very recently. That was just installed. So the second sort of bucket or question was about additional economic analysis. So in addition to us receiving little aid, we did an analysis, and Garrett's going to walk us through that, about the additional energy cost of geothermal. We spend so little on our fuel and electricity, it would take many years to realize the payback period with the additional cost of geothermal. So that's why this hot water univentilator system was recommended by our architect, by our engineer, by internal experts, Michael Tuardi and his predecessor, and then all of the conversations that we had during our facilities committees meetings, our forums, our walkthroughs, our task forces. All of these meetings were about discussions around heating, as well as many other discussions about the infrastructure and the structure of the building overall. So I don't know if you want to sort of talk to that, but I just wanted to emphasize that this wasn't a rush decision, but even before I got here in 2014, this plan was sort of taking a life of its own with Mike's predecessor, Sue Hutter.
Jared, is that different than this?
Is this
Same one?
There's one 11 by 17 and one 8.5 by 11. So you already have
I got 11 by 17. Looks sorry.
I don't have the small one, but it's on the
the
screen.
small ones coming out.
And Garrett joined us, Tetra Tech joined us in 2015, so he's been helping us with this project as well. And we identified this company because they're national, international, and come with a lot of expertise to the table.
Yes, but it's also worth noting that we got to Tetra Tech on the basis of an RFP, and maybe you want to just summarize that process.
Yes,
Oh,
we
yes,
put an
right.
RFP out. Architects and engineers stepped forward who were interested in being part of the project. And through an interview process.
How many responses did we get to the RFP?
I want to say 3 or 4.
That was the second cut? What was the preliminary? I think there was a preliminary response that was bigger than that.
I have to look it up.
Yeah, we have to.
I don't remember because it was a few years ago. But we did definitely interview, I think, 3 or 4.
We took detailed proposals,
Yeah.
3 or 4 engineering firms, and on the basis of their proposals, the interview, the relevant expertise, and the prices that were proposed, we chose Tetra Tech. Is that a
Correct.
fair summary of the due diligence that went into this process? Thank you.
Well, I think one of the things that we were very impressed with Tetra Tech is that they had the most experience in schools and the educational of the firms that responded.
Thank you.
I think we went from 16 to 3, I think.
I think
Might have
that's
been.
my recollection. too.
And then made the decision.
Can someone tell, are there 2 different 11 by 17
No,
sheets?
only one.
Okay, so we just have multiple copies of this.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay,
Extra copies.
I actually have a copy of our proposal submitted on June 15th of 2015. And this is a slide right out of the presentation that we gave as part of the interview process. Just a little bit about Tetra Tech. We're K-12 experts. We have all engineering disciplines in-house. We specialize in ed planning. We have SED and building need experience, extraordinary experience, security and technology in-house, long-range planning tools. So we've been thinking of long-range right from the very beginning. And we are experts in pre-referendum services. The phase that we are in right now, I do it in my sleep every single day. So, the other thing I want to reiterate is what I said at the last board meeting about our experience with geothermal and our position on geothermal. Listen, we're not opposed to geothermal at all. Tetra Tech has extensive experience doing geothermal projects. I did a quick analysis looking back at projects over the years. Our first project that we have record of was over 20 years ago. So we are actually in the forefront of using geothermal when it makes sense in a current location. We have done, and I need to put my glasses on to do this justice, over 22 geothermal projects. New York Institute of Technology, Battery Park City, multiple buildings there, Trinity Church in Boston, Harvard University, Bard College Performing Arts Center. We did the geothermal system there as well. Kenyon Art History Museum, and a number of K-12 schools. So my interest in geothermal is broad. Our experience is broad and our interest is real.
Can I ask a question about that?
Of course.
To the extent you could describe it, when you've chosen geothermal, or when you've recommended it, sometimes people might have just said, we want geothermal, no matter what, that's what we want,
Right.
you'll do it. But when you've recommended it, what are the factors that have caused you to recommend it, and how are they different in the situation here?
Sure. One of the hallmarks of being able to justify financially geothermal projects is having a strong demand for cooling. Okay, a building that needs to be cooled in the summer and heated in the winter, because you're getting the economic benefit out of that year-round, essentially. This building is different. You're not currently air conditioning the building in the summer, so that's a difference there. The economic conditions of the owner are a big part of it. So oftentimes we'll see situations where, even though the paybacks are long, you have an owner who says, we really want to do geothermal, and that does predominantly happen that way. Those are really the 2 big hallmarks for when we see recommendations for geothermal. Okay. So,
have you ever done geothermal when there really was not a foreseeable payback down the road?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
What were the circumstances?
I had owners who said, even though the economic analysis doesn't show a payback within our reasonable time period, we still want to do geothermal because we have the resources to do it, and that's the driving factor. The other thing, David, too, is that all of these payback analyses are based on assumptions.
Yeah.
And so, we make assumptions, we state them in clear, and sometimes sometimes people say, you know what, it's conservative and we think it's gonna pay back faster than that, and they move forward on that. So those are really the two factors that would drive a decision past payback. Because frankly, if payback worked on K-12 school projects, everybody would jump on like wildfire because it makes great sense to do. So they're in K-12 schools in New York, they're very challenging to pull off, especially in low districts.
So of those projects that you listed where the owner said basically payback is immaterial for deliberations, we want to do geothermal. You listed, among others, Bard College, Harvard University, Kenyon, and there's one other private. How many of those who said payback is not a consideration with public taxing authorities?
Good question. I don't know the number off the top of my head. We could go back and look at that. Yeah. Sorry.
No need to speculate.
But he did say they seemed to, they had the funding, they were willing to do it. They had the money, basically.
Yeah, the point I'm trying to get at is when it's the owner's own money that's being invested, the owner can make the decision to invest in geothermal irrespective of payback.
Yeah.
That's not the situation that we face here.
Okay.
Yeah, similar to us as homeowners, we might invest something that might not pay back, but the benefits of that outweigh the actual costs. Right?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So Derek did a calculation on the fly at the last board meeting that was really interesting to me, and I wanted to pick up on it and do it a little more formally. Just taking your current fuel oil costs, taking some approximations of what kinds of savings or increases you might see, and taking a look at the magnitude of the numbers, because I thought it would be helpful to at least get us in a range of what kind of paybacks could you potentially see based on your current energy use. So if you start with, and this is in the larger format spreadsheet, I know it's really hard to read, I couldn't see without my glasses, so I distilled it in a little different format. What's on the screen is exactly the same information. Fuel oil costs of average of $60,000 a year, electric 30, but that doesn't apply to this calculation. I made the assumption that because the square footage of the elementary school is about half the square footage of the total building, that you could attribute 50% of the fuel oil costs to the elementary schools. You debate that, but I think that's a good starting point. I also made the assumption that the energy costs over time is going to increase. I used a 3% increase. That's probably conservative. That over a 20-year period would say that the cost of fuel are going to double over that time. Probably conservative, but I didn't want to come in with too low a cost estimate. I think people would start to say, well, he's trying to make a case that it just doesn't work. So I want to give it a conservative, fair approach. So here's the spreadsheet. I know no one can see it on the screen. There are handout leftovers if people in the audience want a copy of it. But basically what I did is I made those two assumptions variables so that in the spreadsheet we could adjust things. And then I looked at it year over year over a 25-year period, and I called out what it would be at a 10-year spot and a 20-year spot and a 25-year spot for average savings based on percentages, basically. So this isn't a payback analysis. It's not an energy analysis. It's just strictly you pay this much in energy. If you save 10% on your energy, what's it actually going to cost, or what's it actually going to save you over the course of 10, 20, 25 years. So to blow it up so we can all see it, here are our assumptions, same assumptions. And this is a little snippet out of the first part of the calculation. Okay, so this is the 10-year mark. So if your energy use stays exactly the same, then you're not going to save anything over time, basically. So a 0% change in your energy use is going to yield a net zero change over 10 years. If you were to save 10% on your energy costs right now, and you add all those increments up and start with $3,000 the first year and goes from there, it comes to $46,000 over 10 years. If you were to save 30%, or 20%, it's $90,093, and 30% would get you at $140,000. So what we then did is said, all right, let's look at it at the 20-year spot. 30% is probably on the high side of what you might see in savings in this building. You need a full energy analysis to do it, but even at 30%, over 20 years, you're going to save $292,000 of energy costs. And if you take it out to 25 years, it's more like $386,000 again if you were able to reduce it to 30%. Now, why do I have 10% and 20% at the bottom of this? It relates to a conversation that you and I had, David, about the building's being operated in a certain way, and its energy usage is probably on the lower side of what it should be because of the way the building is being operated. So when we put a new heating system or geothermal system in the building, we have to bring it up to today's code, and that's going to use more energy than is getting used today, even if we have a more efficient system. So if you were to see a full energy analysis and a payback analysis, you might find that instead of seeing 30% reduction, you might actually see a slight increase in energy cost. It'd still be really efficient energy use, but it might actually drive up. And the reason
So that's why meeting code, basically.
meeting
The
code.
same would happen with the high efficiency oil
Any
heat,
system,
right?
right.
That's
And
going
so-
to just be that we're meeting code.
Yeah, and so if you compare those two, the geothermal system is going to be more efficient than the high efficiency hot water. So instead of being, here it might be down, or if it were here, one might be up, kind of thing. So this is mainly to give you some ranges, because if we talk about an incremental increase of on the order of $500,000 to $1 million, and we look at this, the payback very likely won't be there. I mean, we haven't done all the full energy analysis. You haven't hired us to do that, or any other firm. And so at this point, I think the numbers show us that it's very unlikely that it's going to pay back. So in order to proceed with geothermal, you would be in a position to say, well, the payback's not there, but there are other reasons that we would choose to do that system. Totally fine with that, just as long as 5 years from now we all understand that it's not going to have paid for itself, and you might see, energies that would never pay for themselves. As long as you get that, I've fulfilled my ethical and professional responsibilities for you. I'm not trying to sell you on it. I want you to be happy with what you got and know what you're getting. Okay? Now, why haven't we done a energy analysis and a payback analysis, and what would those tasks include? Well, first of all, they're time consuming. They're engineering based. It would need to make assumptions about the thermal envelope of the building. You have to model the building completely to understand it. You'd have to make calculations for the efficiency of the new system itself, truly based on a well being drilled, so we know what the thermal efficiency or the thermal conductivity of the earth is, and then we know how big our well needs to, our well fields need to be. That's a big cost factor, is a well field and geothermal. Have to account for the need to bring things up to code to increase airflow. Cost implications of switching from oil to electric. So that first analysis would be straight on oil. If we go to geothermal, there's a cost difference there in terms of the kind of utility. Estimation of the energy that would be used to add air conditioning. We're going to talk a little bit more about air conditioning today, but you're driving the energy use of the building up when you start to air condition it in the summer. So even if you have a super efficient system, if you start to use it 12 months out of the year instead of 9 months or 8 months, it's like inherently going to actually increase the amount of energy that you're needing to use.
And there, if I'm not mistaken, Garrett, the last time we talked, that's really the choice of using. We don't have a choice with respect to heating and cooling. If you have a geothermal system, you have to do both. You can't just heat, or you can't just cool. Didn't we have a discussion about the need to
there's
maintain
a drive to have a balanced
stasis? Right.
use. Depending on the kind of system, if it's a closed loop system, you need a balanced use. If it's a standing water column system that's pulling, constant temperature water out of the earth, then unbalanced systems can be accommodated better in that situation. Okay. The other thing a payback calculation we need to do is to take into account building aid, which my quick, rough number calculation doesn't do, and also the financing costs associated with borrowing. So if we say it's a increment of between $500,000 and $1 million to go to geothermal, well, you have to borrow that money, and there's a cost to borrowing that money, and that has to be factored in.
Just for folks to dimensionalize that, I spent a while after the last meeting with the finance gentleman who was here. He's a consultant, I don't know where he came from, but let's just assume it was $500,000, that was the low end of the band. Our original financing was we're financing $6 million, we're paying about $1 million out of reserves, so we're financing $5 million. The $5 million has a $480,000 a year cost to service that debt. So adding $500,000, rough numbers, would be $45,000 a year. So actually, at the 20-year mark, you're considerably worse off, unfortunately, than at 292, because you're actually 20 years times $45,000, $900,000 further in the hole. So you're actually, you've saved $300,000, paid $900,000, setting aside for discount rates and stuff, and you're 600 in the hole on that.
Sarah,
You've still got to start making it up after the 20 years, if that makes sense.
when we first discussed this, your estimate of $500,000 increment for geothermal was, as I recall, kind of a back of the envelope estimation of what it cost. Have you looked into that further? I mean, are you more confident of that number, or less confident, or higher or lower?
So I think that's a reasonable range to be talking about. It wasn't just a pie in the sky number. It came out in two numbers, actually. If it's a geothermal closed loop well field, we're estimating $325,000 for that. We're also saying that we need to see an electric service, and I talked about this last time, electric service upgrade in the buildings to be able to support all those electric heat pumps. That's on the order of $100,000 to $150,000 just for that electric service upgrade. Those two alone put it in a $500,000 category. And we also have some architectural cut and patch, those kinds of things. If we get into project costs, it's a 1.6 multiplier. So that's why we're in that range. And we haven't done any more calculations on, if we said, gee, we really want to do a geothermal system. First of all, we would need to go do that. You need to compensate us to do that. It's outside of the scope of services to go that much farther. We're happy to do it, but we need to do that to get up on what
We'd have to compensate you for the work you did to do this study, the feasibility study, and that would also include the cost of then drilling a test well. Is that right? Or
yeah, and that wouldn't be.
And that's not you. That's
but we would recommend that,
right.
absolutely. If you're going to seriously consider doing geothermal, it would be good to get a well drilled first to know if the standing water column works, is viable in this situation, or if it needs to be a closed loop system. So there are going to be some costs associated with it if you say, gee, we want to pursue geothermal. Again,
What's the cost of the well, to dig that well?
probably on the order of $15,000 to $20,000 for the well. Might be a little more than that, but
How deep it goes.
Yeah, well, I just think of the ballpark.
yeah.
Okay.
Can I share one more,
Yeah.
back of the envelope?
Yeah, sure.
So just for the sake of argument, I want to see if instead of geothermal, we bought carbon credits to offset the carbon footprint. And David, keep me honest here, because this is Derek, doctor, not climate scientist, and Google.
Okay. Journalist, not
So keep me honest, but current ranges that I saw out there was about $15 to $40 per metric ton is the cost of a carbon credit. It's kind of the range of private market carbon credit to offset for stuff. Oil, I'm going $3 a gallon for the sake of argument because it makes the math easy. We have a $30,000 annual cost, so that's $10,000. Sorry, 10,000 gallons of oil we burn a year to service that. Heating oil puts out about 12 kilograms of CO2 per gallon. So that's 120,000 kilograms per year, which is 120 metric tons per year. Okay, so 120 metric tons times $15 to $40, if you use the calculator on your phone, is about $1,800 to $4,800, call it $2,000 to $5,000 a year neighborhood, right? I don't know where the actual price is and how carbon credits evolve or whatever. And by the way, I have no idea if we're even authorized or allowed to buy carbon credits with school budget money.
What does that mean?
Carbon credits will go.
David, keep me honest, but my understanding is essentially you pay money and somewhere somebody plants enough trees to offset the 12 kilograms that you produced.
And the value of carbon credits changes. They trade
Changes,
on the
they
market.
trade on
like
a
the stock
market
market,
because,
Like
you know, various emissions producing companies.
Bitcoin.
But you can go, if you take an airplane flight, there's websites you can go on and say it's about $2 per 1,000 miles. You can buy back the credits to make up for your personal consumption by taking that airplane flight. So, just FYI.
What do you buy them from?
There's a variety,
You
yeah, there's a
go to a
variety of
broker and
private
you buy them on the
It's
street.
like the Bitcoin.
folks that provide them, so, yeah. So I don't know if that's reasonably valid, but I would say, you know, it's about $5 grand a year would,
idea that,
right, would cover
fix this problem.
the negative footprint that we're producing by burning that much oil, which is a lot less than $40,000 of
Debt service.
debt service.
There
Again,
are-
I don't know if that's legal or we're allowed to do it, but at least I wanted to, I mean, it also suggests to me, and I don't know enough of the energy stuff, that it's either we're not in a good situation for geothermal, or geothermal's not there in terms of meeting the same kind of dollar value of the incremental cost per offset, if that makes sense. But, either.
One other thing to add too is we did some research on NYSERDA grants. That was a question that came up last time. I apologize, we didn't talk about this today when we were preparing. We did reach out to our NYSERDA rep, we have a good relationship with NYSERDA, to ask for their input on what might be available. We're waiting to hear back from them. At first glance on our own, just checking the website, it looks like there may actually be some grants out there. We know that the clean energy grant that you applied for that's closed, that's not an option, but there may be some other ones. Sort of maybe $1,500 a ton, and you might be at 100 tons. So, you know, it could be, if you pursue geothermal, it could be there could be some grant opportunity there as well.
Well,
Okay.
So the third question was about cooling all classrooms. And so we were talking about how we have two conversations going on here. We have a geothermal conversation, and then we were also talking about air conditioning. Air conditioning in the middle school, air conditioning in the elementary. So Garrett tasked him with looking some other alternatives or options that you could share with us.
Just to be clear, we're not talking about two separate questions here. One arises out of the other. It's important to bear in mind that the geothermal option that we're talking about would only serve to cool half the building, the elementary school portion of the building, which includes the 13 classrooms and administrative spaces. So we'd still face a situation, even if we went with the geothermal option, of having a cool elementary school, but maintaining the status quo in the middle school. James points out, I reasonably, that climate change is such that we can reasonably expect warmer days during our school year in May, June, September, and October. And therefore, if we're looking at options that include cooling, as the geothermal would for half the building, we really should look at options that include cooling the entire building. How you get to that option and what the relative costs are to each other is what I think Garrett's going to cover now.
Yeah, exactly.
And so just before you start, does geothermal out of the box, or whatever you want to say, provide the cooling?
Yes.
Like at the 500 to a million, it would cool the portions it was installed?
Half the
Yeah,
building.
because you can run the heat pumps in reverse, and when they're done that, they're cooling as opposed to.
Yep, I just didn't know if there were couplers you had to attach or
No,
something.
so it's all part of it. So, we had conversations about air conditioning all along the way. And one of the things that we did was, first of all, 2 faculty meetings, 2 or maybe more, at least 2, if I remember, and did a survey, asked people to pick the top 4 things that they wanted in a capital project of the staff. And air conditioning came up as a point of conversation. The struggle that we bump into is that the intention or the goal of this project is to be as close to tax neutral as possible. We're going to talk about that more in the next sort of section, but that's the rationale for why, part of the rationale for why the air conditioning didn't come to the forefront back then, because it's cost increase. One way or another, it's going to cost more. And the goal of this project was to stay as tax neutral as possible, and so that's why we got there. Now, we're having a different conversation now. We're talking about maybe needing to air condition the building, and So that's a bit of a rationale or a sort of philosophical change for us as hearing from you, the owner, saying, okay, time out, air conditioning is really important for us, let's consider it. And so what we did is we built another spreadsheet, of course. And this is the small handout, the 8.5 by 11 page, and again, there's some extras that people in the audience would like to see it. And I know this is too small, so I distilled it into smaller chunks. The first part talks about the middle school, because as Ray said, if you do air conditioning somehow in the elementary school, either through a conventional hot water unit ventilator system or through a geothermal system, you still end up with the middle school being hot. And by report, the middle school tends to run hotter than the elementary school. So we looked at two options for how to cool the middle school. The first is to take the existing unit ventilators in the 7 classrooms and convert them to the ability to cool. That means you have to take them apart, you have to slide a cooling coil into them, you have to put it all back together. It's relatively costly to work on that, and it's a 15-year-old unit ventilator. So at the end of that, you end up with a 15-year-old unit ventilator that has the capability of cooling. There's a price associated with that. Then the second option, I'll show you that in a second, I'm not trying to dodge anything. The second option would be well, they're 15-year-old unit ventilators. They're not at the end of their useful life, but by the time you invest all that money to get them to cool, maybe it makes more sense to talk about replacing it. And the difference is actually relatively minimal. It's $160,497. That's just straight math. 7 unit ventilators times it was $1,450 a unit ventilator for the retrofit, or $188,000 for new unit ventilators. So that would cool the classrooms in the middle school using those existing systems. One thing that people might say is, well, can't you just use those little mini split systems, the ones that go on the wall? We see them in restaurants and you see them around. And they're not recommended because it comes down to fresh air. You have to, in a classroom, be pulling fresh air into the classroom to meet code requirements and SED requirements. And so if you do that in those middle school classrooms, you're basically pulling warm, moist air in through the unit ventilator, and then you're running the mini split on top of it. So it's not going to work. Even if you can get the rooms cool enough, people are not going to be happy because half of them is going to be warm and the other half is going to be cold. So mini splits are not a viable option. And then the other thing is, if you start talking about air conditioning the middle school, the first question that I have is, well, what about the gym? Do you then talk about the gym? That one needs some further investigation. If you're intent on cooling the gym as well, we can figure that out. That's part of our base services. We wouldn't even actually do that. That's just, we've got to get down here and do a little more field work investigation, because we've mainly been focusing on the elementary school to date. So that piece is just needs some homework.
Gary, just to be clear, on the middle school solution, either of those will cool the classrooms in the middle school, but not the common areas.
Correct.
Well, not hallways, not bathrooms.
Yep.
The geothermal in the elementary school portion would cool classrooms and common areas. Is that right? Okay.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. I'm going to go to the elementary school next, but are there any questions on the middle school before I leave this? Okay. Just to be clear, it's one or the other, and it's an increment on the dollars that you're seeing in the project right now.
One or the other of these two.
Correct.
If you want to.
Yep. The only question I have is, or I'll make a statement, but tell me if you disagree. It doesn't seem like there's any reason to save $28,000 to retrofit 15-year-old UVs instead of getting brand new ones, is there?
If you ask my opinion,
If you want to do air conditioning, it seems like you might as well get
the way to
Might as well do it correctly.
Yeah, they're going to break 10 years from now, and you'll be, you know.
Did you give us a number last time about what it would mean to extend the geothermal to the middle school?
We didn't. That wasn't a question that came up.
I mean, isn't that relevant to this conversation?
It Sure, yeah, I mean, but again, it's gonna be a big number, I can tell you that already.
It's not gonna be 100,000,
No.
180,000.
Because the way we'd start to approach that would be a square foot cost, and, you know, the square foot size of both of the buildings are about the same, so it's on the order of
So it's like
magnitude.
doubling it, basically?
Does that require a larger well field?
It would, yes. And so, and this I did talk about last time. One of the things that we would recommend if you do pursue a geothermal option is to plan for that portion of the building becoming geothermal eventually. So the well field should be placed and located in a way that could be extended, for instance. In some situations, you might actually say, well, gee, let's do the whole well field now, and then when the building's ready for it, the well field's already there. Again, that's a value decision. Can we afford to do that?
Mike, what's the remaining useful life of the middle school system?
I'd say 15, 20 years.
Easy. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So that was another consideration. We didn't not throw out a perfectly good system that we already have over here. It's not an old system by any means, and it's efficient and it runs good.
If it's 20 years, our financing cycle is 20 years. So if you
We'll
want
talk
to use
about
the
that in
one,
20
it would be a
years.
point to plan on the next one, be modular and upgraded in 20 years.
Yeah. But you do have to plan for replacing that heating system sometime. You're exactly right.
Also with the geothermal cooling, as
Plan
Ray
in
said,
20 years.
we have to keep it going all the time so that the school would be cooled throughout the summer.
Mhm.
Talking about middle school, and you'll get to elementary school, putting in, let's say we install new UV units, but it can be turned off during the summer. That
Sure.
doesn't, we don't, because I know we haven't gone to energy
Right.
consumption yet and the
Mhm.
increase of that, but we wouldn't have to cool the summer in
In
the
a
middle
unit-
school in the summer.
In a
when no one's
unit ventilator
there.
system, it'd just be like a window air conditioner. So everything's good. You're not using energy and you're not cleaning space. That's not getting used.
Are they in different zones, different rooms, or no?
They're each individual.
So you can shut down?
Yep, you get one condenser unit per classroom, and that's the way it works. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so elementary school. So last board meeting, someone asked me how much it would cost to add a cooling hot water, high efficiency unit ventilator system. So the unit ventilators that are budgeted for that system replacement actually would have the coils built right in already. So they're kind of like AC ready, if you will. You have to then add the condenser, which is what sits on the roof or outside, and the piping to get to the condenser, and you have to upgrade the power because the condenser needs extra electric to run. All total for 18 classrooms, that's an increment of about $341,550. That would take the proposed system, hot water system, and add air conditioning to it. Now the thing that you could do, and we have seen some districts do this, Red Oak's a great example. We put cooling coils in their classrooms, heating system replacement, UV heating system replacement, and they actually made penetrations in all the roofs at that time, they're going to start to add condensers on their own over time, a couple rooms at a time sort of thing.
Just in your mind's eye, as you've seen, the condensers can be placed outside outside each of the classrooms, or on the roof above the classrooms. What's most appropriate for us?
Probably outside the classrooms is what my engineers are saying. There were some concerns about the roof that, would it make sense to put them on the roofs, and they asked maybe they could go on the outside. So we'd have to figure that out, Ray, but our reaction is that they would probably be best on the outside of the building, which means like on the outside of the wall.
Right, okay.
So, and I wasn't on the facilities committee or party to any of the discussions of the benefits of air conditioning, but tonight it seems like it would be beneficial. But, so if you were on board with paying $340,000 for air conditioning, and if the incremental cost of the geothermal was only $500,000, not $1 million, the delta seems like it might be worth it, right?
I think
If it's up to $1 million, it's a different conversation.
I think the arithmetic is, I didn't use my phone calculator. 188 to do the preferred alternative for the middle school.
Right.
341
Mhm.
to do basically to cool the elementary school portion.
Mhm.
Gets you to 529,000. Cool both middle school and elementary school.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
that's compared to a minimum of 500,000 for
Mhm.
just the elementary school based on a geothermal solution.
Correct.
Or some 688, called 700 for both.
Yeah.
If you did the geothermal and you
Right,
retrofit the other
right,
side.
yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's another scope of work for Tetra Tech to do an investigation of the scope of the geothermal.
Right, exactly.
system.
I'm just using the 500,000
Yeah.
absolute
But
the
there's-
minimum, right.
You know, there's additional work that we would have to task them with, and well digging that could be about 20,000.
You mean for just doing the one, not doing both?
No, I think what Jill's saying,
Just to define whether it's just, you would have to do a bunch of work, and we'd have to pay for it just to define what it really would be for the geothermal.
Yeah.
The 500 to a million sort of.
the
Is that what you're
the
saying?
188 and the 341, those are pretty reliable numbers.
Yes, absolutely.
They're not speculative.
No, if you said you wanted to vote on those today, I think we have those today. They're real numbers. Let me be clear. The work for us to help you analyze a geothermal system and budget a geothermal system, it's outside the scope of our work, but I'm not looking to charge you a lot for that. That wouldn't take much time for us, but it would be things like helping you get a well driller and analyzing the well drill results and those kinds of things. If you needed an energy analysis and a payback analysis, that's a detailed energy analysis. That's a different animal altogether.
My view is the economics where it doesn't pay back any way you slice it. I'm totally open to a discussion of it doesn't pay back and we still want to do
For
it.
some other reason, right?
But tasking you with doing a payback analysis that will show it doesn't pay back.
Right, and then you send the actual payback. You know?
The 188,000 for cooling is not in the current budget, right?
Correct.
Either was the 341,
Right.
so we've already gone outside our neutral,
Yeah.
keeping it neutral
Right.
by adding these two.
Well, that's why, David, I was saying, I don't think anyone's decided we should air condition, but if you decided you wanted to air condition, then you're a lot closer to the geothermal making sense, or at least it's,
No, but didn't he say it was double the amount to do the other part? So it would be minimum of 500,000 for each section,
well, the 500 would,
right?
it's not a real 500,
No.
but the 500 to a million would still,
Only.
right out of the box,
Yeah.
air condition the elementary, it'd still be in for the 188, right?
Exactly.
So you'd be,
Yeah.
but that's the same, if you decided to air condition, you're still paying that. You're saying the difference is,
Oh, you're saying do the 188 in the middle school and then do the geo down here.
what I'm saying. If you want to you can't air condition, I don't see how you can air condition half the school. So in
Right.
middle school, you lose air conditioning.
Yeah.
I'd rather not have it, you know? Congratulations, you're in middle school. That doesn't seem right. So I think if you say you're in
No,
for
I
air
got it, I
conditioning,
got it,
then you're
yeah.
within like
Yeah.
160,000 of your lowest possible end of your range. Right?
Yeah.
You know, but when you do the,
I
so
assume,
it was very helpful. Thank you.
I mean, you have zero confidence that if you were to undertake a more detailed evaluation of what it would, geothermal, that it would bring us down to a number which, given the constraints that school budgets normally operate within, that you have zero confidence that we get to a point where it would be in the ballpark.
Yeah, I wouldn't say zero confidence, but I'd say very low. Because your building aid ratio is only 10%. That's a huge driver. If you have the state paying 50 to 60% of the system, then I might be like, it's worth it. Put some grants in, start to see something hang together. Unfortunately, we don't have that. So I really don't think so. And obviously we could do that analysis, or you could hire an independent party to do that analysis. I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Let me ask you a different way. What's your level of confidence in the bounds of $500,000 to $1 million?
Probably on the higher side, frankly. Yeah.
Sorry, you're
You think
more
so?
confident it's in those bounds, or you think it's probably at the higher end of that estimate?
It's the higher. I would say very likely within those bounds. I think those are reasonable numbers, but it's probably on the higher end of it.
Pass the median.
What's the first digit?
Listen, if everybody, if everybody can remember me doing this.
Yeah, that's right,
then
yes,
yes.
okay.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, the one other thing I just added to the bottom of the screen is, as we talk about air conditioning in the building, we have to just remember that it's an additional energy consumption on the building. It's like putting a window air conditioner in your house. You're gonna start using more electricity in the summer. That's just
That's an operating cost, not a financing cost.
Now, folks, I gotta say, I hope you understand I'm not opposed to geothermal. I think there may be a sentiment in the community that I am opposed to geothermal. That's absolutely not the case. My wife to me said this morning, my wife is my conscience in many ways, said, why aren't you letting them do geothermal? I'm like, I'm not stopping you from doing geothermal. I just see the economic payback not being there, and if you want to do it, you should know going into it that it's for other reasons. So I'm
Let me take a little bit of a left turn here. Left turn.
How left?
What else would I be taking? So I think that the kind of I will use with bad taste, but the concern of the community is this, as I hear it. That we passed a resolution last year that we take climate change seriously, that no other school district in this state, as far as I know, has made that kind of a claim. And so there's a wish to show that somehow or other we're taking that seriously, and that we're doing something that is consistent with that conviction, right? And I don't know that we have to elevate geothermal into a kind of a fetish, I mean, I think there may be other ways of showing, and not just symbolically, but showing that we're serious about this issue, other than taking on something which I certainly understand represents a financial challenge, which undermines a lot of what else the district can do with its limited resources. I mean, I get that, okay? And I think we all get that. I mean, I think, but I think what we're not hearing is any other agenda that advances, that shows that we're prepared to walk the walk, on climate change. Whether it's in some other form of renewable energy, whether it's energy conservation, and I don't have a proposal, by the way. That's not, I don't do that, right? But I'm saying that it would be that this conversation would be more, I think, more satisfying for people here who are concerned about this issue, and maybe verging on elevating this approach to a kind of a sanctified position that maybe it doesn't deserve. But there hasn't been any other discussion that I'm aware of that shows that we're taking this issue seriously.
So, by the way, on the carbon credit thing, we said, let's spend $5,000 a year. That's I just did math. 0.05% of our budget.
But that doesn't benefit this. I mean, I understand that in terms of conscience or whatever, I get the point. But is there anything we can do in terms of renewable energy as part of our system here that would be?
Off the top of my head, I would say there are two observations. One,
How does that not benefit it? It has the exact same effect of being carbon neutral.
I understand that. I think that probably
I understand we need to
it
install
would be an easier sell. It would be an easier sell if there was some benefit, immediate benefit that redounded to the community in terms of.
I wasn't trying to sell anything to anyone. I was just
Well, I mean,
trying to do the right thing.
but you'd have to do. But it would be a sell. I mean, you'd have to propose that we spend X amount of money for carbon credits.
Don't forget the LED lighting that we're putting in there. Takes a lot of our carbon.
Let me, if I might, Michael, one thing we should not lose sight of is that the proposed upgrade to the elementary school heating system is a high-efficiency hot water system. It is substantially more, and Garrett, you can quantify this one, substantially more efficient in its energy use than the system we currently have, and that is not to be overlooked in your concern for sort of walking the walk. That's sort of observation number one. The other thing is, off the top of my head, I'd say if you were looking for demonstration, demonstrable evidence of walking the walk, the commitment, one of the first places I would look is in transportation, where we have our contractors operate fleets of buses for us. We have our own vehicles and so forth. a commitment to looking at energy efficiency in that area would seem to have more immediate, more tangible, and more, for want of a better word, saleable benefits than the discussion we're having right now with geothermal. So that's the first place I would start to look.
Can I add two things?
Mm-hmm.
I'd pick up on what Mike said.
Thank you.
The lighting, I just looked it up, the lighting system replacement in the elementary school includes occupancy sensors and move to LED lighting. Good portion of the project, $167,000 budgeted for that, and that will directly reduce your energy use for electricity in the building. The second thing is exactly what Ray said. Look, you hired us, and we care deeply about energy. When I talk about a high efficiency hot water system, I'm not joking. I'm serious. We're going to design a high efficiency hot water system. My engineers are committed to it, and it's going to far exceed the code requirements in terms of its efficiency. And it's hard to quantify what you're going to see in that, but our track record shows it. I had that one white paper where we did a real analysis of it where we saved real energy. So you're not just getting a run-of-the-mill unit ventilator system, you're getting a high efficiency one. That's a big important thing. It's hard for people to get their heads around it, and it's a trust factor. You have to trust that Tetra Tech knows what we're doing, and that we will actually deliver on that, but we will. So.
Other questions for Garrett? Then I have a question for Garrett and Laura. Where do we go from here? No, we can answer. Oh, sorry, go. Question,
We didn't
yes.
talk about bucket 4.
We have bucket 4, question 4.
Oh, bucket 4, yes, sorry. Fourth bucket, please,
And
yeah, by all
that's
means.
the size and
Thank
financial
you, Jill.
impact on the project, thank you, Jill. And the board agreed from the onset, or directed us from the onset, to develop a much-needed capital project that included necessary improvements in the building and to remain tax neutral, or at least close to tax neutral.
So, if I might, heretofore we have spent most of our time talking about tax neutrality in terms of the timing of going to market to finance new debt. Doing it in such a way that the debt that we're currently carrying would roll off on a date specified, and the new debt would roll on immediately thereafter, so we would have a tax neutral effect. That people wouldn't see as a change, or a significant change, in their tax levy. That's one variable that gets to the question of how you achieve tax neutrality. The other is how much you're actually going to market, how much you're going to spend on the project, how much you're going to finance, what the carrying costs are, and the more you choose to finance, the more you add on to the project, the further away you get from tax neutrality. And I think we all understand the timing issue. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about what we can afford to spend, or more importantly, finance, and still achieve or come close to that commitment to tax neutrality. And relatedly, if we're going to step back from the tax neutrality strategy, then how far back do we want to step? When we think about things like air conditioning, the elementary school, the middle school, and variations on that theme. So, and that's the next part of the discussion.
I don't really have too much to add to it except for putting down even slides showing here's what your current debt is. It's going to drop 2021 or 22 soon, and the project that you had in front of you, originally the $7 million project, would have done this. Okay, so it's going to increase slightly above, not exactly zero, and the impact is for an average household $500,000 with STAR, $26 per year for that household. So anything you go beyond that is going to drive that number up, and it's not going to drive it up linearly based on which, it's not like $26 for $7 million. If you do another $7 million, it'll be another $26. It's actually going to start to increase exponentially.
Well, it's not exponential, but it's the amount above the 400,000. So the $26 covers the additional 80,000 above the 400. So if we had another 80,000 of debt service, it's 52 basically.
Yeah.
Which is
It might not be
$1 million.
exponential, but it's not just a straight line interpretation. It's slope of the lines can change.
Yeah.
Do people care about the explanation? I can explain.
Sure. Why not?
So we currently pay $400,000 a year to service our debt. The original proposal would be $480,000 a year, rough numbers, to service our debt. The $26 doesn't cover the 480. The $26 tax increase covers the extra 80.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And again, rough numbers, if we spent an additional $1 million, that would be another $80,000 in annual debt service, which would move us from 26 to 52 because we doubled. It's the amount over 400.
Oh, okay.
That's the amount we're going up versus if we stayed at 400, there would be zero change from today. Still, people paying taxes, but zero change.
Sue, I did
But it's
ask.
still only
He's
52
absolutely-
bucks a
yeah.
year.
Hmm?
What?
I agree.
You couldn't have said it better yourself.
I agree,
Right.
totally agree.
The one thing to add to that, though, is then the building aid starts to drop off because you pass the point of capping where your building aid starts, okay? So then it
Fair point.
becomes a little more borrowed.
Yeah.
Does the building aid stay the same? We don't know what the building aid is gonna do in all these years either.
The building aid locks in on the day that you vote.
It does lock in.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Now, Sue, I know I'd asked you about this some time ago, and I don't have to recall the precise numbers, but using the example we have here of the median household assessed value of 500,000, if we did nothing and that 400,000 in debt service dropped off, what would the reduction be? We're looking at a $26 per thousand, $26 per year. What would the reduction be on that $500,000 example?
Well, it would be about $400,000 less than our budget. It would be about 3.75% decrease in taxes, but that's net any increase we might.
That's
Yeah.
just debt service.
Yeah, just
because remember
debt
we-
service,
right.
yep.
$26 covers 80, it's 5 times 26,
Right, so
So an average house
Right.
of that size, you might see a reduction of 150 to 200 a year,
Right.
perhaps.
So
About-
this is sounding like a broken record. There are some who might view this with an expectation that after 2021, after they have shouldered the debt the last 20 years or so, an expectation of seeing their tax levy go down. And we would be proposing not only that the levy would not go down, it would not even remain unchanged. It would go up slightly, which I think we can accommodate, or it would go more than slightly based on what we decide to do with respect to this neutrality question. So,
And then there's the other issue, Ray, that you brought up, and that is the limit of deducting from federal taxes more than $10,000 in state income taxes, state sales taxes, and state property
right,
taxes.
it's an overlay issue that affects everybody, but it does, I suspect it will color voter appetite, certain voter appetite, for any increases, or to put that differently, it might color the view of those already paying more in state and local taxes than $10,000. It's no longer deductible. It comes. So it's an overlay issue, and it affects everybody, not just us, but it's something that we're bearing in mind as we think about if we want to move back from neutrality, how far back do we want to do, and what do we want to do with that, with the extra funds that we would be asking for.
Rick, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I expect there's quite a bit of public comment, but
Yeah, sure.
are we making a decision tonight?
No.
What's the action? This is just discussion?
No, that was actually you. That was
You're
my.
going.
That was the question I had before. Jill reminded me that we had bucket 4, which is this very important part of the conversation. We have to, at some point, we have to make a decision as to what it is we're going to put in front of the voters. And I guess I don't know, forget what I would like. Laura and Garrett, please advise. What do you think, given where we are in these deliberations, given the information that we have in front of us, given the board may or may not have additional questions, what's the best next step for us to consider?
I'd be glad to
Start it out.
start off. First of all, I empathize with you as board members. You know, it's hot up here tonight, but
Well, if we air conditioning.
But you all, as board members, are always facing hard decisions, and this is true for boards across the state. So it comes down to questions of, is $26 per $500,000 house palatable for the voters? Could you go twice that? How does this, what is the community's reaction to it going to be? I can't help with that, and I wish I could.
I'm not sure we can either.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I have no idea.
That's why,
The only thing is asking.
Yep. So that's the second thing I want to talk about, is asking the voters. Okay? This came up last time. We did check, the district checked with legal counsel on the bond restrictions, voting restrictions. Okay? If you vote a project and it goes down, if you change the project significantly, you follow the regular regulations for voting. And it's 45 days for a vote. I said 60 the other day, but last time it's 45 days for a vote. If you want to take exactly the same project out for a re-vote, you have to wait 90 days. Same exact project. The other restriction is you can only vote 2 capital projects in 1 year. You can only take 2 projects out. So if you vote one that goes down and you vote a second one that goes down, you have to wait another 12 months. You have to move the window. So, at first thought it might be, well, let's just let the voters decide. But you have to be careful because you have the debt drop coming, so you can't, you don't want to miss that from a voting standpoint. If you have a vote fail and you need to re-vote, we've seen it happen, try and avoid it. But you want to make sure it's not so far out that all of a sudden the debt dropped off and then they're doing a drop and a spike, because that's going to be felt by the community. So, look, I'm not in a hurry. I'm not rushing you, but that's the reality of the timing of the vote, is you have to be careful of the debt drop and not wait too long.
When you say that put it to a second vote, it has to change significantly. Who determines that?
Again, it's the board that would determine what, because it's you who do a resolution to take a project out for a vote. It doesn't have to change significantly, you just have to wait 90 days if you're going to vote exactly the same project.
But if you do change it, I'm just wondering, what's the
What
threshold
constitutes
there?
a significant change?
Yeah, I'm sure the bond council would say, it's got to be,
There's something,
it's got to be
material.
It's not
or
just
a
a
percentage
change a couple
or?
numbers and, it's $50 different or something like that.
So what are we doing tonight?
Hopefully disposing of the 3 substantial questions we left Laura and the team with. And I think we have, I'll speak for myself, I think they've done a very good job of answering those questions. Beyond that, we're not voting on anything tonight, but we will need to, in order to avoid the drop-off and at least maintain the neutrality with respect to timing, irrespective of how much we're asking folks to approve. But if you want to maintain it with respect to timing, our shot clock is, Sue, Laura, someone tell me, January, February, when? When's it? We would have to be in front of the voters in order to make
I think that, I think we could go out to May. I mean, do it at the May vote, but we could do it in January. I think May would be the drop off.
So you could.
It would be a tight squeeze, I think, if we did it in May, as far as
it
getting.
begins to jam. If you went out as far as May before we go into the voters, you would be at risk of
You'd probably
delayed
lose a
SED approval.
construction year as well.
You'd lose a construction year, you'd also lose the
Yeah.
SED, you jam up the SED approval cycle.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely true. If you voted in December, you would make this construction season in 2020. If you voted in May, you're probably going to miss that because of SED's review time.
Right, but we have It's not a binary December or March. You can vote anywhere in between.
Right, you've got
By the way,
December,
have we missed the vote window for December? I think we have. Yes, we have. So that's
Yeah.
so, okay. That answers that
But then we've
question.
got to be careful, because if we push it too far, we're into winter, and then that's going to be
We're already into winter. There's no December is winter.
December,
January, February, March is.
we still missed like we couldn't do this like December 30th or something like that.
No one's gonna not put anything in front of the voters.
Yeah,
on New Year's
that's
Eve.
true.
I think the earliest should be now is the January vote, if you were to go off, or go in that cycle. The other, and you know, there are lots of theories on how to vote, and we've had a lot of conversations over the years on it. The one downside to voting in May is it could potentially jeopardize a district's regular vote if it's a controversial project. So that's something to just keep in mind. You don't want to
We're in front of the voters for an operating budget.
Regular budget out.
In order to make that December 4th vote, you could have a special meeting, I think by next week. I'm pretty sure that next week is the cutoff. And Beth is giving me the eye, because would have to be in the paper. But the board would have to have a special meeting to do that. And there would be a lot of scrambling to get that done.
Listen, I'm not a board member, but I'll speak. You don't want to rush this.
Right, no, this is, both Beth and Sue, thank you very much, and Diana, we are not going to have anything in front of in the papers, in front of the voters, or anywhere else by next Wednesday.
No, I'm just saying, if somebody says the December vote is out, if the board wanted to, and I'm not trying to rush or anything, I'm just saying, you could have a special meeting next week, but no, I'm just giving you all your options between now and May.
Let me
Yeah.
just follow up on something you said earlier. You talked about NYSERDA.
Yeah.
How hard would it be to find out what might be there for us?
Not hard at all. We just need to hear back from the NYSERDA rep to confirm what we
We've
think.
already asked them, right? Is that the idea?
And how much could they be trivial or?
Might be on the order of $100,000. 1,500 a ton is what's on the website.
This is a straw man, okay? I'll just stipulate at the outset. Is it worth asking with counsel, Laura, Garrett, to put together for our consideration at our next board meeting, or if there's additional due diligence that needs to be done on any of these key questions at a meeting after that? The variations on theme that we have so far considered, which is the geothermal, the project as originally proposed at $7,040,000 with a high energy, high efficiency hot water system in the elementary school, maintain the status quo in the middle school. That's air conditioning in neither space. So that's option number one, the first one we considered before we began the discussion of geothermal and or the other options for cooling. Option number two would be the geothermal option for half the build. This is a straw man, so this is the point at which you can object or comment. Option number two would be the geothermal alternative for the elementary school, bearing in mind that we'd still have a solution that only air conditioned, that heated and cooled, only the elementary school, and the likely incremental spend with that solution would be $500,000 to be further refined between now and the time a resolution comes before that draft comes before the board. Option three would be variations on the air conditioning of the middle school and the elementary school based on a high efficiency hot water system as proposed in the initial. So you add in the condensers, the coils, and so forth. So those would seem to be three basic options. That's where the question seems to have boiled down to at this point.
The one thing I'd add to that is, if you're gonna do the geothermal as a standalone option, you probably wanna, based on the conversation I'm hearing tonight, you probably wanna talk about including air conditioning in the middle school too.
Right.
Yeah, yes, okay, so, yes. Right, so it's a geothermal, got it,
Yeah.
yes.
And it would be a geothermal with the field large enough to do the geothermal in 20 years for the middle school.
So, well,
So,
okay,
That's adding another.
wait, now let's stay with that then. Okay,
I would, that'd be great if you wanna do that. And if the voters would approve it, that would be, wonderful, because then you're showing forethought and you're getting work done now that is planned for the future at today's dollars. I do worry about that $26 going to something that becomes unmanageable. So the one thing you could do is you could hold that as a possibility. You could say you're going to do it for the current system. You could have us design a bid alternate for the extra well field. You could bid that on bid day, and if the money was available, then we'd be able to afford that.
that's right.
Talking bid alternates at this point, I know it's a little murky, but it's
In other words, like another proposition, you mean?
No.
No.
Yep, just promise that you're gonna do the well field for the size of the building that you need, but if you get great results on a bid day that you come in under budget and you have some extra money, then you could add the rest of the well field, at that point.
I have two questions. Well, I have so many, but let's say we were to decide, let's pick option 2. We all collectively decide we want to go through with and go for geothermal. Is it an option to go back to the project as it stands and take some elements out or revise, find $500,000 that we're spending towards something else to put into the system? I don't know if that's an option. You guys have done years and years of work. I'm not trying to take that work away. I'm just curious. And my second question is, and I haven't been through this procedure before, is it an option to put it to the voters to say, line item 1, approving system 1, and then at an additional increase, do you vote to take on this additional project at an increased cost? Can we give the voters that choice?
You can, yes. Garrett, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, so let me take Courtney's first question first. Of course, you could look back at the scope and take things out. There was a lot of things that needed to get deferred just to put the heating system in, because originally the heating system wasn't even on the table for this project until we started thinking about it and realized if you don't vote another project for a while, that heating system is going to cause you problems. Okay, so we've already seen a lot taken out of the project to this point, but you're right, there's plenty of other dollars in there. It just then becomes a question of, well, what would you choose not to do? And that's certainly fair game. Maybe you decide this is less important than doing that. But I will say, what's in this project right now is really no frill stuff. So you're going to be making hard decisions about this or that. There's no advice in there.
Because there was more things that we wanted in there. That
I remember the
we had to.
original. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, I want the dream list back, but.
Yep. So we'll talk about multiple votes. It is possible on the same day, to vote multiple capital project propositions. Proposition 1, Proposition 2, could even do Proposition 3 or 4, but that's very uncommon because part of the thing you have to make sure of is that the voters don't get confused. That's really, really important when we start talking about multiple propositions on the same day. The way the propositions need to be written are, in this case, you have a base proposition, Proposition 1, that must pass in order for Proposition 2 to be able to pass, because what you don't want is everybody to vote on Proposition 2 and then vote down Proposition 1. So it's possible to write them like standalone independence, but in this situation, we would say base project proposition 1, add-on proposition 2. I've thought a lot about this, personally, for you guys, what makes the most sense. It's a hard decision, and my worry of voting 2 propositions is people might get confused, and if you're going to do that, you have to be very clear about what it is they're trying to vote on and how that works. You have to be super precise for how the pre-referendum communication campaign would go.
My understanding is it's a relatively easy thing to do if you're putting before the voters something as straightforward as a turf field on the AstroTurf field on the athletic field. These projects, and for an additional $500,000, do you want a turf field? And that's usually the way those bifurcated ballots
where
do.
it's a straight add.
We did a bus, right?
Right.
Did we do it with vehicles?
In this situation, if you talk about voting the geothermal as the add-on, my worry of confusion is people might not understand that there is a heating system in the basement that they have to absolutely.
No, we'll just include all the notes
Yeah.
from the meeting and
Yes.
bring it through.
And we'll replay this video again and again.
I could see the voters with this going, no, and not getting it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Does that sound like a suggestion? By the way, does the straw man, including Jill's observation, does the straw man seem to make sense for us as the next thing for us to have in front of us to consider, which is what we would put in front of the voters, one or more of those 3 scenarios?
Can I ask one thing, Ray?
Yeah, sure.
Or ask the rest of the board, is there a chance on the 2 choices for the middle school, if we could get some sort of a consensus to at least make that one down to 1?
Oh yeah, I think yes, this is what yeah. I think Derek,
Well, because the
Derek
feeling
Derek
I got
put it quite well.
was that people were kind of saying the 188 made more sense than the 160,
I
but
think that's, yeah.
at least
I
if
think we're
that's
all-
decided, then that's one less thing we have to.
I have a hard time imagining that we would do this and not air condition the middle school.
I agree. The idea of doing a system that only cools half the building has never made sense to
Doesn't
me.
make sense. It's just hard to swallow the idea of spending over $500,000 on air conditioning. The possibility of it only being a little bit more for the geothermal, but I also
It's not-
understand all of
it's-
the.
As I
It's very
understand it, it's
complicated.
not a little bit more, it's
Yeah,
a
it's
lot.
not.
Sure, that's true. It's up to $1 million. That's twice as much.
Let's look at 3 proposals.
I think that makes good
Or
sense.
if in the drafting you say it's 4, then bring 4, whatever it takes. And let's do that. Take what time you need to be able to put appropriate numbers against those propositions, because that's.
It feels a little bit late to be asking this question, but 100,000 from NYSERDA, are there any other potential sources of support for the idea of a geothermal system?
I did ask my engineering staff that, and they're looking into it. Nothing's come to the forefront at this
There are
point.
foundations,
A lot of people are doing a lot of research, so maybe there's someone who's got.
It's obviously, if it turned out that there was an extra $500,000 and somebody in some foundation or whatever were pushing it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Totally open. And we'll keep looking, but, for all those
So your
people who
people
care
are-
about this,
Your people are looking at that now.
yeah, we are, absolutely. Yeah. So the 24th is your next board meeting, as
Yes.
my calendar shows?
Yeah, 24th and then November 7th.
We can do that. What I'm going to do for the geothermal piece is I'll have to estimate on the more conservative side, because we're not going to have a well, we're not going to go through all that process. I'm going to have to make some assumptions of conservativeness, because we don't want to build a project that only got
So you have the wherewithal to take us, to put a finer focus on the 500 to $1 million, come down with a number, whatever it is. I'm not going to get back into that again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Now,
for that.
can that be, will we be able to see that ahead of time so that we're ready to discuss it for the next meeting?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Can I just get clarification, because are you looking to do the vote at the next meeting? Vote again at the next meeting? Because
I'm a little concerned about, getting the numbers, because I'm gonna have to work with Jason on that
And
as
Sue,
well.
I think I said a moment ago, take what time you need,
Okay.
get the resolutions to the point where we can decide on it.
Just so you know, the process, I'm gonna have to get firm numbers from Garrett and then work with Jason, to get those numbers, clear numbers to you. I mean, we're talking, estimates now, as far as adding those, things, so,
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to make that clear.
Can you just repeat what numbers are we getting?
What?
In time?
What's the question? I'm sorry. Oh,
So the specific things we're getting back.
the original proposal.
Yeah.
The proposal to, instead of spending 1.6 million on a high-efficiency hot air system to cool, to heat the elementary school, a geothermal solution to heating the elementary school, which would also include cooling the elementary school. And as someone said a moment ago, well, it would be geothermal plus the cost of air conditioning to the middle school. And I guess the third would be, I'm running out. Anyway, the third would be traditional high efficiency hot water system used to heat and cool both the elementary school and the middle school. Right? Yeah, this is the,
Didn't you already do the third?
We already calculated.
yeah, that one we have the numbers for.
Well, the second,
I can hand that to the financial.
the only difference is a $1 on the $500,000 bill.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right, 'cause
Right, we have the
Number
first,
two
we
is
have the
just plus
second.
the middle school 186 or whatever.
You got it, exactly.
188.
Anything else on this? Because I have a feeling we have a substantial, or at least public interest in the comment, which is where we happen to be in the agenda, so,
Right.
One last thing.
one last thing.
So there's a database that I told the board members about that's called DSIRE, and it's a database of incentives for every state for different kinds of energy programs. So we can all look at it.
Right.
Oh, we have homework?
I think it's absolutely worth exploring what opportunities are out there. The only thing I would say is we need to bear in mind that grant writing and grant consideration and then approval and then paying are substantial time sinks. That doesn't mean we shouldn't look at them, but remember, we're also working against the clock that has the tax neutrality consideration baked into it.
Derek
So
wanted to say
Oh,
something.
I emailed you all while we were talking, an interesting article by the MIT faculty on universities that are striving to get to carbon neutral and a range of different ways they're doing it, including MIT.
I think
By the way, they're all using carbon offsets as part of their strategy.
in the interest
Not the only thing, but they're not getting there without it.
So in the interest of irony, we point out that we're having this conversation at a time when the Florida Gulf Coast is being flooded by yet another 200-year flood, which would make it the second that we've had in the last month and a half.
Yeah.
This is a fact that for some bizarre reason tends to get overlooked by the network television news, not by the New York Times or the Washington Post, thankfully, but it is an amazing fact what's happening right now in the Florida Gulf Coast.
They're both
And it is
200
related
years
to the
old.
conversation we're having.
Very much so. Public comment. Anyone? Someone we haven't heard from before. Up there, please. And if you would introduce yourself, even if we know who you are, so that people watching on TV.
Hi, my name is Sarah McKeon. My daughter is a student here in the kindergarten. My first comment, I have a few points. My first comment would be, I think that any option that's on the table must include cooling. I don't think any option that doesn't have cooling should be considered. My daughter has already come home on a few occasions talking about how uncomfortable she was in her classroom in kindergarten. And considering that temperatures are only going to increase, they're not going to decrease, I think that needs to be addressed now. The second issue is, I think, in terms of considering what cost offsets will be and how this may pay back itself over the long run. I think we do have to take a long-term view that also factors in the regulatory situation, the political situation, and considering that costs are probably going to change according to what nations decide to do about carbon tax, carbon pricing. And you may have seen that the UN recently came out with a report on climate change, making recommendations for how to address these critical issues that are confronting us now, and recommending urgent action. In terms of the carbon prices, the carbon offset prices, they're recommending raising that to $135 to $5,500 per ton. So we're not talking about $14 per ton here. So that needs to be considered in terms of offset and the many changes that are going to be happening over the lifespan of whatever system is chosen. And then finally, I do think that long-term goals need to be considered here, and if the climate change analysis was added to the prerogatives of the board recently, I believe you said it was in July, then I think that needs to be seriously considered, and also an effort made at more parent outreach and what parents think are appropriate for the school to do in terms of infrastructure, because parents are very concerned about climate change and the impact that it's going to be having on their children. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Hi, Gabriel Salas. I live on 403. First, thanks so much for holding this open. My background is in renewable energy and mostly in private equity funding of renewable energy, so I kind of see both ends. I like to think that. The first, I have a couple of pending questions on the pricing estimates. I think the $500 to $1 million for this size buildings are kind of cheap. I think it's going to be pretty much tied to the top end of that. But it's also, if you double the size, it's not going to double the cost. So probably like a single building will be between 750 and $1 million, and if you do both buildings, it's probably going to touch 1.2 on the top end, not necessarily double. But you know,
by the way, it's 500 to $1 million over the 1.6.
No, you know, I understand.
Okay.
No, all I'm saying is that you're going to have a common base of civil works that are shared, so it doesn't double. It expands, but not as fast. Then the second thing is in terms of efficiency of use of resources for carbon footprint reduction. I'm with Derek. If we're going to spend $500,000, $1 million, let's make it the most efficient. The carbon emission reduction credit market, before it shut down in Europe, was trading at around $12 to $14 a ton. The voluntary emission reduction credit trades at around $7 today. So if you want to allocate a lot of money, let's make sure that it doesn't just cover or reduce the footprint of a 125 kid school, but it reaches a lot more than that for the same amount of money, right? Just top of my head, $500,000 can fund a power plant that would basically supply the entire town of Phillipstown. So let's not lose focus on the maximization, optimization of the spend in terms of the carbon footprint reduction that we have. I think nobody disagrees with the importance of doing it. It's just how do we do it that we may have a little bit of a disagreement. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is on NYSERDA. There are a lot of programs in NYSERDA. I'm not sure we qualify, but if we do, I think there's more than $100,000 in it for us. I've seen a few programs for towns in the area. Some of them have used it or applied and failed. We'll succeed on that, but there's a lot more that I think can be got out of that one. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see like a little bit more refined budget for that, if possible. NYSERDA is a route to go to, and at the end of the day, let's not forget about the goal here, which is reduce the most with putting the same amount of money with the same kind of budget, right? Because if not, we're just going to spend $500,000 to reduce a relatively small footprint house, whereas we can do the same thing but for a much larger one. That's all.
Can I ask
Thank
you a
you.
question?
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So, the problem with NYSERDA, I think for us, is that we need to make decisions on this fairly quickly. And so the question is, can we get information or with some confidence from NYSERDA in a timely enough way that we can make decisions cognizant of what
Look, my experience with NYSERDA, which is limited compared to other people that live around here, but I have some, it's really a crap shot. So I would like to tell you that, look, in 7 days they'll have it, or in 35 days they'll have it. But the reality is that they may have it in 2 or they may have it in 90. Right? So it's a little bit of who do you speak with, if the program is open or shut. Give me a second, Bruno. If the program is open or shut, there's a lot of things. So it's really hard to nail a timetable for it.
Garrett, do you have any thoughts about that? How we can get a
I
quick
do, actually.
response from you?
Yeah, I appreciate all your comments, thank you. You can't count on the NYSERDA money. You can't factor it into a vote. You can't have it reduce your $26 increase because it's too early to tell. NYSERDA grants don't come until after the project's installed and met their criteria. So there are just way too many variables. That's super important, really valuable to think about grants, but they come in as late project income that would tend to reduce how much you need to bond. That's the way it plays.
Thank you. Other comments, questions, observations? Sarah, were you? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Could I give my name?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
My name is Christopher Hashwitinsky, if you need me to spell it, that's a separate. What I was going to mention is, I don't know if the board is aware of it, but the New York State has a program which encourages schools, specifically schools, to install solar energy, photovoltaic systems, in a way which does not require the school to actually put up any financing for it. I don't know if you're aware of it. If you're not, I will just summarize what I believe the program is. You can find it on the internet under NYPA, which is New York Power Authority, K-solar. So NYPA, K-solar. What they do is if the school expresses an interest in this program, you contact the Power Authority, which you do right on the internet. They will send inspectors to do a site inspection to see if the school is suitable for a photovoltaic installation. This is at no cost to the school. If it is suitable, they will then prepare a design, in effect, for the photovoltaic installation. They will prepare an economic analysis. The project is only expected to go forward if the school actually makes money on it. The two examples I've heard of is there's one school which I think made about the economic benefit to the school was around $20,000 a year. Haldane School in Cold Spring, I think, is on this program, although I'm not sure.
Mr. Twardy, our head of facilities and transportation, had that job at Haldane when that system was installed, so has relevant insight.
We had what we call a power purchase agreement over there. There was no taxpayer money. What they did is
Haldane did not have to put up any capital for the school either, for the installation either.
correct.
I think it's the Solar K program by the sound of it.
But what they did is they guaranteed us 25% reduction in the rates that we would normally receive, normally pay on what we produced. Over there, they were producing 60% of their energy, so they were getting 25% reduction on 60% of their energy usage.
Okay, anyway, they come up with an economic analysis. This is all done by them, not at the cost of the school. And so I would recommend that to this school get in contact with this program I mean, you don't have any financial commitment in getting in contact with them. You just start the process and see where it goes.
It seems a worthwhile inquiry, absolutely.
But I can imagine two connections with what you've been discussing this evening. One connection is that if you put on in photovoltaic, then if you also have a geothermal system, which I believe operates using heat pumps which are fed with electric energy, the photovoltaic feeds the energy for the geothermal, so your energy costs you begin to know rather precisely what your energy costs of running the geothermal are going to be. There's no issue of what will be future utility costs, essentially. As I believe the New York Power Authority program is structured, they actually give you a contracted price, both for what you will pay and for what you will get in selling surplus energy to the utility. It's all written into the contract. So you're dealing with very known, very well-defined items. Anyway, so that's my suggestion, is get in touch with this program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will be very brief. I'm Crystal Ford. I'm exhausted. Some 8th graders kept me up till midnight last night. So I just came back from an amazing 2-day youth climate experience with our 8th grade and some of our 7th grade students from Garrison. And at the end of today, we had a little get together, and we talked about what climate actions we wanted to do to bring back to our school. And the top 4 things, the 2 that were tied, was solar and geothermal, and then came composting and getting rid of plastic. And so that was like, oh, that's good. I'll take that back to the board. But the one thing that was really kind of like heartbreaking is one of the students had said, I feel like I know a lot, but I feel like no one will listen to me. And that was really sad. And I wish that the students could come and at least talk before the board. But I had one student, Sophia Wallace. She wrote a little statement that I'm going to read on her behalf and give her a voice. So this statement may or may not sway your vote, but I want to make it clear nonetheless, the time to change is now. You guys most likely won't be affected by climate change as we will. We are the new generation, and we are the ones who are going to have to change it. But it's up to you to provide us with the resources to do so. Thank you, and I hope you make the right choice. And I know you guys work really hard, and I would love the option to be able to choose one or the other, and I don't know if that's too hard, but I'd love as a voter to be able to make that choice and be like, yes, I'm paying $100 more if that means geothermal, but that's just me, so thank you.
Crystal, thank you. Thank you for hosting those kids. By the way,
It was so good.
apropos of nothing at all, a very well-written statement.
It was. I was like, oh, she wrote it on the bus.
Consistent with our literacy goals. The things we actually do here besides figure out heating and cooling.
But Crystal, I'd like to know from you what you think. Let's just stipulate that by doing geothermal, it will mean a tax increase of whatever, $100, $200, $300 in a community where most of the people don't have kids in the school. I mean, what do you think the electorate here would tolerate?
Of course, I can't say for certain, but I think there are a lot of people who care deeply about the environment, and they might be just willing to make that vote to have the school.
Like the cost doesn't matter?
Like the cost doesn't matter. Maybe that's, I don't know. Again, I'm incredibly biased. I could be just completely wrong, but based on the Climate Smart Task Force that I'm on in Phillipstown, I know people really do care about trying to make the switch. And then also, if we put the system in, the system's not going to change for 30 years. Once once we put the hot water system in, we're not gonna switch over to geothermal anytime soon. Like, we are really like, 20, 30 years, we can come back to this conversation. So this
We used to do, geothermal regardless of cost. We have no evidence of that.
I have no idea. I have no idea. It's a valid point.
Hi, my name is Phoebe Gear. I have a son at the school, and I grew up here. I'm a graduate of the school. But I will say, to just hop onto your conversation, being plugged into a few different groups and sort of communities in Garrison for my whole life, I do think that the people who live here safeguard the natural beauty of this area and really come here for a reason, because this is such an unusual community for where we are located. And I do think that this correlates well, beyond whether you have a child or not, with a lot of the values espoused by the people who choose to own land in this town. And so, like you, I do not have any idea if it is or is not something that's viable in terms of actually passing it, but I do think that there are many people in the community who would want the opportunity to have that option put before them.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Tormey. I have a second grader and a third grader at the school currently. I have a couple of questions regarding the overall, what's in the $7 million. Not related to geothermal, actually. I was wondering what specifically is included in the $81,000 for the gym, lighting, and sound package. What does that exactly involve, if you have that?
So there is a stage dimming system.
So a dimmer rack?
Yep.
Okay.
24 circuit stage dimming system with DMX and LED theatrical lighting.
Okay.
And an auditorium sound system, speakers, mixers, DSP, and wireless microphones.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And then the playground budget of $150,000 is to continue to expand on the playground that GSF put in, and do further groundwork on the field. There's also a I believe, I might be wrong on this, but I think it's about $265,000 for the gym and the art room. Is that correct? Gym and art room? It's under innovation, because I think there's about $500,000 total that ended up as innovation under the whole package.
So, the art room reconstruction is expand the art room to include a makerspace, providing casework throughout, plus associated plumbing and mechanical work. And Sarah, I don't remember what we also included in that category for the other.
Would it be removing this perhaps for the library?
You're
Right?
exactly right.
Okay.
So, it's demolish the computer lab and to recarpet the space.
Okay. I just want to be clear as we're going forward what every little line item is, and also to really think about how the community will feel when the money goes into, say, expanding the makerspace versus air conditioning. Both, I think, are great, important causes. I've seen the makerspace do wonderful things. I know Mr. Young is fantastic with it, and I fully support it. But I know you're all making really hard decisions, too. So I would hope that some of that would feed into, maybe there are some spaces, to Courtney's point, where some of the, I know you've made a lot of hard decisions, but where some of these numbers could move around again, or you could look to outside funding for something. So I just wanted to toss it out there and make sure I was clear and the community was clear exactly what this proposal will include. And then I'm going to switch my hats real quick and throw on my GSEF hat. I'm also the president of the Garrison Children's Education Fund. And we just recently launched, this is also not related to geothermal, our 2018 Fall Appeal this month. This is our annual push to raise the funds that support the grants that have already and will directly impact all the GUF students. This is everything from makerspace equipment, putting in the playground, books for the middle school to support the classroom library curriculum, which has been wonderful. Every donation counts, every dollar, bigger the better, but every dollar really counts. The funds raised by our Fall Appeal enrich the experience in the classroom for all the children. Go to gsef.net and you can donate. Also, our next grant deadline is November 1st. Anyone in this community can write a grant to GSEF. Teachers, parents, anyone in the community. So please think of us. I already grabbed the Boy Scout leaders information. We've funded Boy Scout initiatives in the past here, including the amphitheater. So we are a resource for this school. It's a great school, and people are willing to give to us because they believe in what's happening here. I really firmly believe that. So as you're thinking about all these projects, please continue to think about us too. And please donate. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. As always.
It's like end of the commercial.
Absolutely. Anything else? If not, we have board member comment. We've all had lots to say tonight, so. Anyone? I'll have one thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So, I think it's really, really important to remember that this process started years ago. And that teachers have been involved, members of the community have been involved. We had a huge list of a wish list of things that we wanted to do, and we've narrowed it down. And so if people think that things are not important on our list, we need to hear that from the public now. I mean, we've been working on this for years, so I need for people to come forward and tell us that something's not important.
We had a series of walkthroughs, multiple last fall, and a task force that went through priorities as well.
Meetings.
So making hard decisions. So, then something else has to give. So there's been a lot of community input. But here we are because people have more ideas and more input.
Anyone else? I have one thing. Lest we lose sight of the fact that principal mission of this administration, the faculty, and of our health board is actually educating the children of the Garrison School and not worrying about single column versus some other kind of well. It is worth noting that a week and a half or so ago, the New York State Department of Education published the results of its 2018 standardized test results for English and math. And I know Laura and Alex will, I hope, in short order, present us with a detailed analysis of our results for 2018. I would only say that having done a very preliminary look at our numbers relative to past years and relative to other schools throughout the state, we have shown substantial improvements, extremely impressive improvements, and performances in multiple grades and multiple subjects at the very highest levels of the state results. So that's by way of whetting people's appetite for a presentation on this so that we can, again, not lose focus on what's most important to all of us. So as we put together our agenda, please let us know when you're ready to do that. If it's at our next meeting, that would be fine with me. If it's the one after that, that would be fine too. If it's much later than that,
not so fun.
Right.
Not so fun. That's okay.
If there's nothing else, we're going to adjourn to a brief executive session. So resolved, the Board of Education of Garrison Union Free School District adjourns its October 10th regular meeting. So moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Abstentions, carried.